are like that too. So, I mean, I wanted to start with something very basic and broad, which is the new guidelines. Officials involved in preparing the memo said that the work on it had begun long before the uproar that led to Stanley McChrystal's firing or leaving, but said that the incident did increase the Secretary's resolve to add more discipline to the Defense Department's interactions with the media. Secretary Gates, in fact, said, quote, "I have said many times that we must strive to be as open, accessible, and transparent as possible." This is in a memo outlining the new guidelines. He said, "At the same time, I'm concerned that the department has grown lax in how we engage with the media, often in contravention of established rules and procedures." And so, like I said before, this meant that you had to approve a lot of these, if not all of the interviews, which makes me wonder if you get any sleep. I mean, is that hundreds or... I wanted to ask you about the process, about how this works. Before I do so, though, Jeff Meyer, who is Gates' spokesman, said in a subsequent interview that the Pentagon was not trying to restrict criticism or free speech whatsoever. He said, or when a reporter said, well, that's what's probably going to happen, whether you intended to or not, Meyer insisted, quote, "It's not going to happen. If we do this right, it should not happen. We should empower people to make wise decisions. All we're asking for is that when somebody rises above one's individual area of responsibility, that we eventually get visibility on it so we can be aware of it, so we can provide insight and perspective and advice, because the reality is somebody speaks to one thing that they may not know about, and it could have a ripple effect throughout the rest of our operations, including decisions that are being made in the National Security Council or other areas." I paraphrased it a little bit there because it went on. But that being said, can you talk about how this has been working?
I don't get much sleep, but it doesn't really have anything to do with this memo because we really, I agree with Elisabeth. I don't know if Tony and Brian will agree, but hopefully this memo has not had any huge discernible effect about how the media works. The media is not the enemy. We don't treat the media as the enemy, and in fact, we have gone to great lengths to try to reach out when folks in the media have issues that they want us to deal with.
Right.
Journalist safety on the battlefield and Guantanamo are just two of those, and we can talk about that in a second. But the memorandum preceded the Rolling Stone article by several weeks. It just hadn't been issued. It's a big building, and it takes a while to get some of this stuff out.
Right.
But the purpose was pretty much what Jeff has articulated. The rationale was seeing increasing comment on issues like Iran, Iraq, the Joint Strike Fighter, other budget issues that came from sources where folks in the building said, who's talking and where do they get that information?
Right.
There's a phrase in the Pentagon, which I'm sure journalists learn quickly because it's used a lot, called situational awareness. In other words, what informs a decision? Who has the broadest scope in being able to explain why a decision is being made and what the elements are? The purpose of that particular memo was to say that it was important that if you're going to engage with the media, that you know of what you speak, and that if you are going to engage with the media, that you find out what you don't know. We, in fact, have gone to great lengths after that memo was issued, not only to make clear to the media that there's no iron curtain that is falling, but to reach out into the building as far and wide as possible to say, we want people to engage with the media. This is extremely important to our society. It's important to the military. Mm-hmm. It's important that the facts be known, whatever they may be. We have a dual responsibility in our office, which is to be as open, transparent, and candid and timely as possible with the media, and also to make sure that our men and women in uniform are protected. Mm-hmm. It's a hard tightrope to walk, but we walk it. And this memo was not intended in any way to be a zero-sum choice between those two things. It was intended essentially to say to those inside our building, not the media, those inside our building, if you're going to engage, know of what you speak. I very rarely get personally involved in a particular decision about whether to engage in an interview. I have a fantastic team of people, and some of them are here today. Brian Cullen, who who's former 6th Fleet spokesman, now heads my Office of Communication, Planning and Integration, and who in fact headed the task force about 8 or 9 years ago that led to the embeds. We have people like that. We have people like Colonel Dave Lepan, who was the first person in uniform to head our media operations as a Deputy Assistant Secretary since 9/11. We have men and women in uniform, civilians, political appointees, all working together on a daily basis, really 24-hour-a-day basis, to deal with the media to make sure that people get what they want. Mm-hmm. Out on the battlefield, one of the things we made immediately clear was that those who are on the battlefield who are hosting embeds, this memo has nothing to do with your engagement. You engage with the media. They're there because they want to see and hear firsthand what is going on the battlefield. It's really intended, Josh, for those people who probably like anonymity better than accountability. Mm-hmm. And we'll get to the point that you make in terms of on the record as opposed to background in a second. But the point that we're trying to make is if you're going to give information as an official of the Defense Department, those who are receiving that information, writer and reader, deserve to know the full context of it.
Right. Anybody want to?
Well, so what is the reason for a background briefing like last week? What's the rationale behind it? It doesn't seem to make any sense.
Let me address that, because first I agree with you that as many engagements with the press as we possibly can have should be on the record. We have no disagreement there. With regard to the briefing that was held on Don't Ask, Don't Tell, it was very interesting. I read a story by one of your colleagues, Ann Flaherty, and we're well aware that you and your colleagues, many of the press, were not happy about this being on background. Ann surmised in writing that this was because the official involved probably didn't want to wade into the spotlight at that particular moment on an issue where essentially the Pentagon is not in control. This is an issue where the Pentagon is not in control. And we are seeing now an extremely uncertain time with regard to this legislation, with regard to both the courts and the legislature. The decision to engage on that issue was made. We wanted to provide the press with as much context about what the Pentagon was doing in light of the uncertainty as we possibly could. And we made the decision that this had to be on background because the individual involved wears several hats with regards to this issue, and in fact was not the determiner of overall policy and direction and where we're going on this. These are judgments being made by the White House, by the Senate, by the courts. So I think it's well within your right, and we understand the criticism that was made about that particular background briefing. But in all honesty, we felt that was an exception rather than a rule, and that was the context in which we made the decision.
Well, the bottom line is that the issue was too controversial for you guys. But this is life. This is life. I mean, life is filled with minefields, and
yes.
that seems like you could use that excuse for any number of briefings. And I won't belabor this. I'll stop at this point. But you could have used that's a good excuse for any number of briefings.
It is a good excuse for any number of briefings, and we are trying our best not to make that excuse and have people on the record when it is an instance where we actually are determining policy, where decisions that we make essentially are the decisions that are guiding the overall direction. We felt that in this instance, we were not trying to duck questions. We were trying to better inform. We were trying to inform from our perspective, and we thought that we wanted to put out the person who was best qualified to do this. But we felt that under the circumstances, the choice we had to make was, does the person go out publicly and therefore risk unintended consequences about the issue itself? Or do we try to address what the press is asking for? And we were well aware that the press was clamoring for information about this issue. We were genuinely trying to respond to that press interest. and we let the chips fall where they may. But that was the rationale.
Doug, does that mean we can look forward to more on-the-record briefings from top officials going forward from here?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's the intent of all of us at the Pentagon, to be on the record. And in fact, we have made a particular effort over the past several months to bring in briefers by civets, by television from Afghanistan at all levels to go on the record. We do this weekly, whether it be General Caldwell or General Clark or General Rodriguez, folks who are working in the field, both civilian and military, NATO officials, Afghan officials, and we're doing this on the record. So there's no, in my view, perfect prescription for how to do any given thing. But you are right that it is better to do things on the record, and we strive to do that. And that's the explanation for why we came to the decision we did on that particular briefing.
I can give you a contrasting historical perspective. In 1968, I reported to West Point, my window on the world, because they didn't let you have radio, they didn't let you have TV, was the New York Times. We plebes delivered the New York Times to every upperclassman's door, and we were expected to be able to give a 3-minute synopsis of the front page of the New York Times to sleepy upperclassmen. So we go from that, and then to my retirement in 2006, it was speak to the press if you want, stay in your lane, talk about what you know. And that was about it. And it was very late in the game that we got into media training, where we actually tried to teach senior enlisted and officer components of the military how to engage with the Fourth Estate. And it was surprisingly, and as late as 1994, the courses at the Army War College were oversubscribed for the how to talk to the press, media training, live camera training. So we've caught up a little bit, but I obviously we've got ground to cover yet.